Mud exploded under Elias Boone's boots as the Rio Grande tore a screaming boy through the flood water. The rope burned across his palms while the current tried to rip the child away. Elias' coat slipped open, revealing the pale cavalry scar across his ribs where a Comanche lance once nearly ended him. Then the boy's necklace flashed in the storm light. Apache markings. Elias dragged the child onto the bank as distant riders appeared along the ridge, because saving that Apache boy was about to bring the entire tribe to his door before sunrise. Before we ride deeper into the story, hit subscribe, ring the bell, so you'll never miss another ride through the legends of the Wild West. Now, let's get back to the trail. The child coughed river water onto the mud and rolled onto his side shaking. He could not have been more than 8. Thin shoulders, wet black hair plastered across his brow, bare feet cut raw by stone and driftwood. His small hands clutched at the necklace around his neck, as if even half-drowned he feared losing it more than losing breath. Elias dropped to one knee beside him. The river roared behind them. Cottonwood roots tore free from the bank and vanished downstream. Rain slashed sideways. Far up on the ridge, the riders held still against the storm. The boy's eyes snapped open. Wild eyes. He tried to crawl away. "Easy," Elias said. "You're out now." The boy's gaze fixed on Elias' face, then on the scar showing through his torn shirt, then on the revolver at his hip. Fear moved through the child like another current. He scrambled backward until his heels slid in the mud. Elias did not reach for him. He knew better than that. He pushed his hat back and sat in the rain so the boy could see he was not coming closer. "River near took you," he said. "I pulled you clear, that's all." The child looked toward the ridge. So did Elias. The riders were gone. That tightened something cold inside him. He had seen Apache scouts before, not often, enough to know that men who vanished in a storm were not men who had turned home careless. They were circling, watching, weighing. The boy tried to stand and nearly fell. Elias caught him by the elbow before he hit the bank. The child jerked hard, but his legs had no strength left in them. Elias let go the instant he was steady. "What's your name?" Elias asked. The boy said nothing. His teeth chattered. His lips had turned blue. Elias shrugged off his coat and laid it on the ground between them. "You can freeze if pride suits you, or you can take that coat." The child stared at it. A long moment passed. Then he snatched it up and wrapped himself in it without taking his eyes off Elias. There was a little blood on the boy's forehead where something in the river had struck him. One wrist bore a rawhide cord, frayed as if cut loose in a hurry. Elias noticed the marks around it, not from binding, from gripping. Somebody had held on to him until the flood won. He looked again at the necklace, bone and turquoise, hand-carved, old, a family piece maybe. Not trinket trade. This was no stray camp child. Someone important would come for him. Thunder rolled over the river. The first dark of evening was settling into the storm. Elias rose and looked west toward his spread. 2 miles of muddy trail, 1 cabin, 1 barn, no hired hands, no wife, no children, just a man with a scar, an old sorrel gelding, and a piece of land most folks said was too lonely to prosper. The boy spoke at last. 1 word, soft but sharp. Takoda. Elias nodded. Elias Boone. The child seemed to test the name against his fear. "You are soldier." "Was it? You fought Apache." Elias looked toward the river. "I fought where they sent me." Takoda's eyes lowered to the scar at Elias' ribs. The memory came without welcome. Dust, screaming horses, a flash of painted riders through mesquite, a lance point punching through coat and flesh, 3 men dead before sundown. One boy no older than 16 begging for water while flies settled on his mouth. Elias had buried what bodies he could and carried the scar ever since. He pulled his shirt closed. That's an old road. I don't ride it now. Takoda said nothing. Rain hammered the river harder. Elias studied the swelling black water. No chance of carrying the boy across tonight if he even knew where a cross was. No fire on the far bank, no signal, no safe ford. And if the child had been swept this far south, his people might be miles away already searching dead water and broken timber. He heard hoofbeats behind him, not the fast, controlled beat of scouts. Loose, familiar, white men riding hard because trouble smelled close. He turned as Wade Harlan and two others came splashing through the brush from the cattle trail. Wade reined up first, broad-shouldered and wet to the bone, beard dripping. Clem Rourke and young Jesse Pike pulled beside him, all three with rifles across their saddles. Wade took one look at the child in the coat and went still. "Well," he said, "there's a fine way to invite death to supper." Takoda shrank behind Elias. Elias stepped half a pace to block him from view. Boy came out of the river. "I can see what river birthed him," Wade said. "What I don't know is why you're keeping him." "Because he's alive." Clem spat into the mud. "Not for long if his people think you stole him." Jesse leaned from the saddle, squinting. That an Apache sign at his throat. Takoda clutched the necklace under the coat. Wade looked to the ridge line, then back to Elias. "You need to leave him at the crossing and ride away." "In this storm?" "In any storm. Best his own kind find him from there than from your porch." Elias' jaw hardened. "And if they don't find him before the night cold does?" Wade's face darkened with a weary anger that came from long years on hard ground. "Then that sits with the Lord, not with you." "No," Elias said quietly, "it sits with whoever leaves him." The three riders exchanged glances. Wade swore under his breath. "Elias, you know how this valley sits. One bad spark and the whole line catches. Folks still remember the Miller place, still remember the Slater boys. You bring that child home, and every eye from here to Dry Wells will be on your cabin before dawn." Elias looked at Takoda. The boy was trying hard not to shake, trying hard not to look afraid in front of men who feared him more than he feared them. That settled it. "I'm taking him in," Elias said. Clem barked a humorless laugh. "There's your death signed plain." Wade's voice lowered. "Then at least send for the fort." "No." "All right, the marshal." "No." "Then what?" "When the river eases, I'll return him." Jesse frowned. "Return him where?" "That," Elias said, "I'll learn when I have to." Wade stared at him, anger giving way to something heavier. "This is about that scar, isn't it?" Elias' eyes lifted. Wade regretted the words the instant they left him, but he did not take them back. "Wasn't enough blood then," Elias said. "You figure maybe one boy dead by weather will settle the account." "That's not what I said. It's what I heard." The reins spoke between them. At last Wade pulled his reins tight. "If riders come to your place tonight, don't expect every neighbor to ride with you." "I won't." Wade nodded once, grim and final. "Then God keep your foolish soul, Elias Boone." He turned his horse. The others followed. Jesse looked back once at the child, uncertain and ashamed, then vanished into the trees after the men. Takoda watched them go. "They hate me." They fear what follows you, Elias said. Takoda lifted his chin with a pride too old for his years. My father says men who fear a child are already weak. A brief shadow of a smile touched Elias' mouth. Your father sounds like trouble. My father is Black Kettle Ridge. Elias looked at him. That was no man's birth name. It was a title, not of a chief perhaps, but of standing, a war captain, a clan leader, somebody whose son would not be left to flood water unless the river had cut straight through a desperate moment. The storm thickened. Night was coming hard. Elias whistled once. His sorrel gelding, tethered higher up the bank, tossed its head and came as far as the lead would allow. Elias untied the reins and brought the horse down carefully over the mud. You ride? He asked. Takoda frowned, insulted. I am Apache. That'll do for an answer. He boosted the boy into the saddle, then mounted behind him. The child went rigid at first, then settled when Elias only gathered the reins and turned toward home. They rode through the storm under a darkening sky. Water sheeted across the low ground. Twice Elias had to circle fallen trees. Once they crossed a wash where the horse nearly lost footing and Takoda grabbed the saddle horn with both hands but made no sound. The boy had grit. Elias respected grit. By the time the cabin came into view, the last of daylight had bled out and the world was all rain, lantern glow, and black shapes moving under thunder. Elias swung down, lifted Takoda from the saddle, and ushered him onto the porch. The cabin was rough pine and stone, not big, one main room, a back lean-to for stores. A loft above for blankets and old saddles, home enough for a man who had stopped expecting company years ago. Inside, Elias lit 2 more lamps, stoked the stove, and set water to warm. Takoda stood near the door watching everything. He did not ask permission to move. He did not trust shelter yet. You can sit, Elias said. Takoda remained standing. Elias stripped off his wet shirt. The old scar ran pale and ugly across his ribs, a bent line from flank to chest. The child saw it and looked away. Elias toweled dry, pulled on another shirt, and crouched by the stove to heat water in a basin. After a while, Takoda said, I saw scars like that on my uncle. He killed the man who made them. Elias dipped a rag in the basin. And did that heal him? Takoda did not answer. Sit, Elias said again, less gentle this time. This time the boy obeyed. Elias cleaned the cut on his brow. Takoda held still, though his jaw tightened when the rag touched skin. He was all sharp bone and stubborn pride. When Elias handed him a cup of broth and a heel of bread, he accepted both like gifts were dangerous things that might be taken back. Outside, the storm rolled across the plain. Inside, the stove crackled. A man and a child sat in the narrow truce of warmth. Takoda ate every crumb. When he finished, he set the cup down and asked, Why did you save me? Elias leaned back in his chair. Because you were drowning. Other men would not. Other men ain't my measure. Takoda studied him. My mother says when a man pulls another from death, the river remembers. Your mother says many things. She is dead. The words fell plain and small. Elias looked into the stove. Mine too. Takoda nodded once, as if some private truth had been confirmed. My father says grief makes 2 kinds of men, the ones who close and the ones who carry. And what am I? Takoda considered him, still deciding. Elias let out a breath through his nose. Smart mouth for a half-frozen boy. A soft pounding came at the door. Not knuckles, the blunt butt of a rifle. Elias rose at once, drew his revolver, and blew out one lamp. Takoda slid from the chair without being told and moved behind the table. The pounding came again. "Boone," a voice called through the rain. "Open." "Wade Harlan's." Elias crossed to the door and opened it an inch, revolver low at his thigh. Wade stood on the porch alone, hat brim running water. "What?" Wade held out a Winchester wrapped in oilcloth. "You left your good rifle at the south pasture yesterday. Thought you might want it tonight." Elias took the rifle. Wade did not meet his eyes right away. "I still think you're a fool." "I know. But I've known you 12 years, and I know this too. Once you set a bone in your mind, no team of mules can pull it loose." "That's so." Wade glanced past him into the room. "Boy alive?" "Yes." "Then hear me plain. Men in town saw sign on the ridge before dark. Scouts. Folks are bolting shutters." Elias said nothing. Wade lowered his voice. "If they come for blood, you light that lantern twice in the window. I may not be proud of your choice, but I won't leave a neighbor to die alone." Something in Elias' face softened. "Thank you." Wade grunted as if gratitude embarrassed him. "Don't thank me yet. Might be I'm only coming to bury you." He turned to go, then stopped. "One more thing. There's talk of Silas Voss riding this way." Elias went still. "Voss?" Wade nodded. "Crossed back from Mexico 2 days ago with 2 of his jackals. I heard it from the freight men." The name darkened the room without entering it. Silas Voss, former scout, gun for hire, a man who sold his rifle to rage wherever rage paid. 4 years earlier, Elias had seen him leave 3 Apache women dead near a dry arroyo and call it soldiers' work. They had nearly come to blows over it. Voss had smiled the whole time. "If he's near," Wade said, "then whatever's on that ridge may not be the worst thing coming." Elias' hand tightened on the rifle. Wade stepped into the rain and was gone. Takoda had come out from behind the table. "Who is Voss?" "A man with no breaks in him." "Does he hate Apache?" "He hates anyone fear can make him rich from." Takoda listened the way old men listened. Then he said, "Such men make bad ghosts." Elias barred the door. "Then let's keep him living a while longer." The storm eased near midnight. Not fully. Enough that the rain thinned and the land began to breathe again between gusts. Elias sat in the dark by the front window with the Winchester across his knees. Takoda slept on the cot near the stove, still wearing Elias' coat, one hand curled around the turquoise necklace. A coyote cried somewhere west. Then another sound took its place. Hoofbeats, many not rushing, approaching with terrible calm. Elias stood and moved the curtain edge aside with one finger. Shapes were coming across the moon-paled pasture. Riders, a wide ring of them, silent as shadows over wet grass. No whooping, no loose formation. Disciplined, deliberate. The kind of silence that said these were not raiders in a fever. These were men who had already decided what sort of night this would be. Takoda woke before Elias spoke. The child rose from the cot in one smooth motion and crossed the room. He looked out and whispered, "They came." The riders spread around the cabin and barn, keeping distance but holding every line out. Elias counted near 20 in the dark, maybe more beyond sight. He saw bows, rifles, lances. He saw faces painted for war and faces bare as stone. At their center sat one older man on a gray horse, straight-backed, braided hair touched with silver. The boy's breath caught. my father." Elias looked down at him. "You know what happens next." Takoda swallowed. "He will ask why I am here. And you'll answer true." Takoda nodded. Another rider moved forward from the ring, carrying a white strip of cloth on a stick. "Parley." Elias opened the bar from the door. Takoda seized his sleeve. "If they decide you meant harm, they will kill you before you can lift your gun." "That may be. You still go." Elias looked at the boy. "I saved you in the river. No sense drowning now in my own cabin." He stepped outside. The night air smelled of wet earth, horse sweat, and river mud. Moonlight slipped through torn clouds and silvered the rifles. Elias left the Winchester inside. He stood on his porch with only the lantern glow behind him and his empty hands visible. The older man on the gray horse studied him for a long time. Then his gaze moved past Elias to the child in the doorway. Takoda stepped onto the porch. "Father." The man's face did not change, but something fierce and private flickered through his eyes. The riders around him remained still. He said something in Apache. Takoda answered in the same tongue. A quick exchange. Tense. The child spoke with urgency, pointing once toward the river, once toward Elias. The older man listened without interrupting. Then he looked back at Elias and spoke in rough English. "You pulled him from the flood." "I did." "You took him into your house." "Yes." "You gave him food." "Yes." The man studied him another beat. Many would not. "I know." A younger warrior near the front leaned forward. "Maybe he keeps the boy to trade." Takoda turned on him at once, anger flashing. "He pulled me from the river when you were not there." The younger warrior fell silent, chastened more by the child's fury than by any elder word. The older man slid from his saddle. He was tall, not as tall as Elias, straighter, wore authority like some men wore coats. He came to the foot of the porch steps and stopped there. "I am Nanton Chisholm," he said. "Takoda is my son." Elias inclined his head. "Elias Boone." Nanton's eyes dropped to the scar at Elias' side where the shirt had pulled open. "You wore blue once." "I did." "You fought my people." "I fought everybody somebody pointed at." No one moved. Then Nanton said, "And now you save my son." The river was the enemy tonight. For the first time, something like respect touched the Apache leader's face, though it came wrapped in caution. Maybe. Takoda stepped closer to his father. "He did not bind me. He did not strike me. He left the door unbarred until the storm grew dark." Nanton looked at the child. "You speak much." "I speak true." That almost brought a smile to the father's mouth. Almost. He turned back to Elias. "A debt is born." Elias shook his head. "No debt, just a boy not dead." Nanton's gaze sharpened. "Among my people, a life returned does not disappear like smoke." "Among mine," Elias said, "too many men count kindness like coin." The words hung there, then Nanton nodded once. "Tonight my son returns with me. Another night perhaps we speak again." Elias' shoulders loosened a little. "Another night suits me fine." But before the moment could settle, a horse came tearing in from the northern dark. One rider, hard and wild. He shouted before he reached the circle. Apache words first, then broken English. Nanton wheeled on him. The man nearly fell from the saddle getting down. He grabbed Takoda's arm, speaking fast, desperate, pointing north along the river. Takoda's face changed. All the boy in it vanished. Only fear remained. Nanton's jaw hardened to iron. "What is it?" Elias asked. Nanton looked at him. "2 of our women were taken near the north crossing before dark. 1 wounded, 1 missing. The trail leads toward the white settlements." Takoda said, "My cousin Apache." A murmur moved through the riders. Not loud, deadly. Elias felt the night tilt. Sila's Voss. Nanton's eyes narrowed on him. "Do your people steal women from flood banks too?" "My people ain't one herd," Elias said, "but there is a man near this valley who would." "Name him." "Sila's Voss." Several Apache warriors reacted. They knew it. Nanton's face went colder. "That dog." Elias nodded once. He was seen riding this way. The younger warrior from before stepped forward, hand on knife. Then the white man knows too much. In a blur, 3 rifles angled toward Elias. Takoda moved between them so fast even Elias started. "No." The child planted himself on the porch steps, arms spread, furious and afraid. "He saved me. If Voss took a pony, this man did not help him." Nanton raised one hand. The rifles lowered. Then he looked at Elias with a measuring stare that saw farther than comfort. "Will you track this Voss?" The question struck like a bullet because it went straight through safety and out the other side into obligation. Every rider waited. The easy answer stood right there. "Not my people, not my blood. Take your son, ride your own war." That was the answer a prudent man would give. The answer that would keep a lonely cabin standing. The answer that would let the valley sleep. Elias heard himself say, "If Voss took her onto white ground, your riders following hot will start a killing none of us can stop." Nanton said nothing. "I know his methods," Elias continued. "I know where a man like him holes up, and I know how he thinks when he believes fear is working." The Apache leader's eyes never left his face. "So you ride." Elias thought of Wade, of the town, of every old wound this could rip open. He thought of a little girl years ago on a burned-out wagon road, dead because men on both sides had decided vengeance made quicker work than mercy. He had buried her too. He still remembered the ribbon in her hair, stiff with dust. He looked at Takoda, at the silent ring of riders around his home, at the long dark valley where one man's cruelty could light a war. "I ride," he said. Wade Harlan was waiting at dry wells at first light with a face like split rock. News had run ahead of dawn the way bad news always did. 3 ranchers stood with him outside the feed store, rifles in hand, watching Elias saddle the sorrel under a paling sky, while Apache sign still marked the wet ground beyond his cabin in every man's imagination. "You lost what little mind you had left," Wade said. "Likely." "You mean to ride with them?" "I mean to stop Voss before this turns into grave." Clem Rourke, already red-eyed from drink or fear, stepped forward. "You ride with Apache into this town and folks will think you turned." Elias cinched the saddle. "Then folks can learn thinking later." "Damn you," Clem snapped. "One of ours gets touched and you go hunting for their girl." Elias straightened slowly. "One of yours, Clem, is that how you tally worth now?" Clem's mouth worked, but no sound came. Wade rubbed a hand over his beard. "Where do you think Voss is heading?" "Old Mission ruins above Mesa Coyote if he wants cover." Smuggler Arroyo west of the Gypsum Flats if he wants a fast run south, or the abandoned lime quarry if he wants no one hearing screams. Jesse Pike stood near the water trough, pale. You think he'd keep a captive alive? If she has value to him. Wade looked hard at Elias. And what value is that? Bait, Elias said. Trade or insult. No one liked the truth in that. Wade lowered his voice. You know what happens if Apache riders come tearing through dry wells after a taken girl? Men will start shooting from windows. Boys will die because old fools itch to prove courage. That's why I ride first. Wade stepped closer, then take help. Elias glanced at the men gathered there. Clem looked scared enough to shoot shadows. The others know better. I don't need hot heads. You might need a witness. Elias considered that. At last he said, You come, no one else. Wade nodded once. They rode north under a thin grey morning with the river still swollen at their left. Nanton and 6 warriors met them where cottonwoods gave way to broken hills. No one wasted words. One Apache rider carried a scrap of blue cloth tied to his saddle horn, women's dress material, blood on one edge. Takoda was not with them. Good, Elias thought. A child should not ride into what waited. Nanton inclined his head toward Wade, a question without trust. He's steady, Elias said. Wade muttered, That's the kindest lie you've told in years. They followed Sign up through wet sand and trampled brush. Elias led when the trail crossed stony ground. Apache scouts led when it split among gullies and mesquite. Between them the track sharpened. 3 horses, 1 drag mark, a rider careless in his confidence, another dismount where someone had fought, blood drops, small footprints running, then none. By noon the sun broke through the last of the storm clouds. Steam rose from the earth. The land changed from flood-dark green to hard glare and thorn. They found the first body in a shallow wash, an Apache woman, middle-aged, shot through the chest, covered with her own torn shawl. Nanton dismounted and stood over her. No display, no cry, only stillness so complete it pressed on every man nearby like weight. Wade removed his hat. Elias crouched and studied the wound. Close range, powder black around the hole. Voss liked certainty. On a stone beside her, a mark had been cut with a knife. A crossbar through a circle. Voss's sign. Wade swore softly. He wants us angry. He wants pursuit, Elias said, fast and blind. Nanton's voice was calm now, which was worse than rage. Then we do not give him blind. They wrapped the woman in her shawl and laid her beneath a cottonwood until her people could return. Then they rode on. By late afternoon they reached the old mission ruins. Stone walls half fallen, bell tower broken, swallows nesting in cracks. Elias dismounted and checked the dust. Nothing fresh. But inside one ruined room, they found a cookfire still warm and a tin cup stamped with Mexican silverwork. Voss had used the place sometime that morning. On the wall above the ashes, he had carved another sign with his knife. The same circle and crossbar, and beneath it, a single word, Quarry. Wade stared. He wants us to come. Yes. So we don't. Elias looked toward the western hills. He's too vain not to mean it. Nanton stepped into the doorway. The lime quarry. Abandoned 10 years, Elias said. One road in, steep walls, tunnels in the backside. Good place for a trap. The younger warrior from the night before said, Then we storm it. And he kills the girl the moment he hears hooves, Elias replied. Then what? The warrior shot back. Ask him kindly. Nanton silenced him with a look. Elias crouched and drew in dust with his finger. Main road here, rim trail above, drain cut on the south face, narrow enough for one man to crawl if he don't mind scraping skin off his ribs. I used it years ago chasing rustlers. Wade looked at him. Years ago, before or after you got stabbed? After. That explains a fair amount. Elias ignored him. Voss will watch the road, maybe the rim if he's sober, not the drain cut. He always underestimates pain. Nanton studied the rough map. You go in alone. I do. Wade's head jerked up. No. Yes. That man wants you dead personal. You said it yourself. Which means he'll look for me with his pride, not his sense. Nanton's gaze moved between them. While he looks for Elias Boone, my warriors take the rim. Wade frowned, and me. Elias looked at him. You hold the road. If Voss breaks, you stop him. Just him. Anyone carrying the girl alive. Wade swore again, but softer this time. You asking much for a man who called me a coward yesterday. I didn't call you coward. No, you just made me feel it. Elias gave him the ghost of a nod. Then, ride brave enough to annoy yourself. That nearly drew a laugh out of Wade, though it died before reaching light. They reached the quarry at dusk. It yawned white and dead against the red hills, a scar in the land deeper than any river cut. Broken carts lay rotting near the entrance road. Wind moved through the pit with a low, hollow sound. The walls dropped steep and pale on three sides, with black tunnel mouths opening like blind eyes at the back. No smoke rose. No horse shifted in sight. Too still. Elias slid from the saddle and checked his revolver, then the Winchester. He stripped off his hat, canteen, and coat to move easier. The old scar in his side pulled as he bent. Rain and long riding had woken it. Good. Pain kept a man honest. Nanton touched his arm before he went. If the girl is dead. Elias met his eyes. Then I still bring you truth. Nanton nodded. Truth is often the heaviest burden. Elias moved along the south face until he found the drain cut half hidden by brush and chalky rock. Narrow as memory, mean as barbed wire, he lay flat and crawled in on his elbows while the stone scraped shirt and skin. Dust filled his nose. Once the scar caught on an edge and tore open old fire down his ribs. He kept moving. Above him the last light faded. Below in the quarry pit a man laughed. Elias froze. Silas Voss. No mistaking that voice, smooth, amused. A man who found the world funniest when someone else begged. Elias crawled another 10 feet until the cut widened enough for him to peer down between stones. Firelight flickered below in the quarry floor. 3 horses tethered. 2 men beside the fire. One was Voss, lean and rope-hard, yellow hair hanging to his collar, revolver worn low. The other was a Mexican gun hand Elias did not know. Near the tunnel mouth sat a girl bound to a broken wagon wheel. Young, maybe 16, dark hair tangled, blood at the temple, still alive, a pony. Voss was saying, "Your people are taking too long, I near think they don't love you proper." A pony spat at him. Voss smiled and wiped his cheek with 2 fingers. Good, I was getting bored. The other man chuckled. Elias measured distance. 30 yards to the fire, too far for silence, too far if the girl sat between them and the shot line, need closer. He slid back from the edge and waited. Minutes passed. Then a hawk cry sounded from the rim above. Apache signal. Voss's head snapped up. What was that? The other man rose. Voss drew his revolver. We got company. Good, Elias thought, look up. He slid from the drain cut, dropped the last 6 feet into loose white gravel, rolled, and came up behind a rusted ore cart. Dust burst around him. The other gunman had turned toward the rim, rifle lifting. Elias fired once. The man spun down into the fire. A pony screamed. Voss whirled and shot at the flash. The ball cracked stone inches from Elias' head. Boone, Voss called, laughter back in his voice even now. I knew it would be you. Elias shifted left as 2 rifles barked from the rim. Apache fire showered sparks off rock. Voss moved fast, dragging a pony by the ropes toward the tunnel mouth while firing one-handed toward the shadows above. Drop her, Elias shouted. Come take her. Elias ran low through the dust and broken stone, using carts for cover. A bullet tore past his ear. Another smashed the wheel beside him. He reached the dead gunman, snatched the fallen rifle and fired toward the tunnel. Voss ducked, still dragging the girl. Then Wade Harlan's Winchester cracked from the road entrance. A horse screamed. Voss's tethered mount went down kicking. The quarry erupted. Apache warriors poured over the rim trail like dark water, dropping into the pit. The surviving horse tore loose and bolted. White dust turned the air into fog. Elias closed the distance. Voss saw him and shoved a pony aside, drawing a second pistol from behind his back. That trick had killed better men than Elias Boone. But Elias knew it from older days. He shot first. The bullet took Voss high in the shoulder and spun him half around. Still, the man stayed on his feet. Damn you, Voss snarled. He fired wild. Elias felt heat stripe his left arm, not deep enough. They were 10 feet apart now, close enough to see all the rot in each other. Voss laughed through blood. You always did love the wrong side. There ain't a right side to your kind. Voss's eyes flashed. These people killed your friends. So did men like you. That hit somewhere pride lived. Voss lunged for a pony, grabbing her by the hair and jerking her upright between them, gun pressed to her temple. The quarry stilled. Apache warriors ringed the pit now, weapons raised, but none dared fire. There it is, Voss said, breath ragged. Now we speak plain. A pony trembled but did not cry out. Voss fixed on Elias with a mad brightness. I can kill her, then they'll kill me, then they'll kill 3 settlers by sundown, 30 by Sunday, and this whole rotten valley burns, or you let me walk. No. Think harder. I am. Voss smiled with cracked lips. Always were slow. Elias lowered his rifle. Wade's voice echoed from the road. Elias, don't. Nanton stood on the quarry wall above, face carved from night. He too said nothing, but his whole people were waiting in that silence. Voss saw the lowered rifle and laughed. That's it. Honor, such a stupid disease. Elias let the rifle fall farther, as if defeated. Then he spoke to a pony, not to Voss. When I say fall, you fall hard. Voss frowned. Only a flicker, enough, now. A pony dropped like her bones had vanished. Elias fired from the hip. The bullet smashed through Voss's gun hand. He screamed and staggered back. Before he could recover, Takoda's younger warrior cousin came over the wheel in a leap of fury and drove him to the ground. 3 others were on him at once. Knives came out. Rifles lifted like clubs. Stop, Elias shouted. No one listened. Voss writhed in white dust, half laughing, half choking, looking up at a ring of faces that had every reason in the world to end him. Nanton descended into the pit with terrible calm. The warriors parted for him. He stood over Silas Voss. Voss spat blood at his boots. Nanton did not blink. He looked at Elias. This one belongs to my dead. Every eye turned. Here it was. Not the rescue, not the ride, not the quarry. This, the true place where a man showed what lived at the center of him. Elias stepped closer, arm bleeding, lungs full of lime dust. He looked at Voss and saw everybody he remembered. Women in an arroyo, a boy with a split throat. The stupid grin Voss had worn over all of it. There would be ease in letting the knives drop, ease in calling it deserved, but ease and right were not brothers. If you kill him now, Elias said, voice rough, every settler coward in this valley will call it proof they were always right to fear you. The younger warrior snapped, let them fear. And then they'll shoot the next child they see on the ridge, Elias shot back. The next woman gathering wood. The next old man riding to trade. Fear grows quickest on blood. Nanton's eyes narrowed. He murdered one of ours, took another. Yes, he would have murdered my son if the river had not missed him first. Yes, and still you ask mercy. Elias looked at Voss. No, I ask justice. The word moved through the quarry like wind through dry grass. Nanton said, justice is a white man's rope and a white man's paper. It does not always reach us. Elias felt that, felt how true it was, then let it reach now. Voss laughed from the dirt, though pain twisted him. You think dry wells hangs white men for Indian blood. You're dumber than I remembered. Wade climbed into the pit and came to Elias' side. Marshal Tully will if I stand in his office till Judgment Day. Voss's eyes flicked to him. Wade spat near his head. I'm tired of men like you making cowards of decent folk. That was the first honest thing Wade Harlan had said all day and maybe all year. Nanton studied both men. Then he looked to a pony who stood freed now, wrists bleeding where ropes had cut. She said something in Apache. Her voice did not shake. Nanton listened. He turned back to Elias. She says you came into the wolf's den when you could have stayed behind your own door. Elias said nothing. Nanton looked down at Voss one last time, then he raised his hand and the warriors stepped back. Bind him, he said. The younger men obeyed, though not gladly. Voss stared up in disbelief. You let me live. Nanton's face held no warmth at all. No, I let you face the weight of your own name. They took him to dry wells at noon the next day. That ride was the longest any man in the valley could remember. Apache warriors on one side, settlers on the other as word spread ahead. Elias and Wade rode in the middle with Voss tied across a mule and a pony mounted behind Nanton, chin high despite the bruises on her face. Dust rose beneath every hoof and hung in the air like judgment. When they reached town, windows opened, doors cracked. Men stepped onto porches with rifles in hand and then thought better of it when they saw who rode beside whom. Marshal Tully came out of his office buttoning his vest, squinting into the sun, thick-bodied, slow-speaking, a man who looked sleepy until trouble forced him awake. His gaze took in the whole procession and stopped at Voss. Well, he said, either hell froze or somebody did my work for me. Elias swung down from the saddle. You'll need a cell. Tully spat tobacco juice into the dust. For which half? For him, Wade said before Elias could answer. Marshal Tully looked at Wade Harlan as if waiting for the joke. When none came, he looked at Voss again. He saw the wound, the ropes, the faces of Apache warriors not 20 yards off, and the hard quiet in town. Then his expression changed. What's he charged with? Murder, Nanton said in steady English. Abduction, war-making. That last word settled over the street like smoke. Tully nodded once. Then I'd best hear it all. He heard it in his office with the door open and 2 armed deputies sweating beside the desks. Elias gave his account. Wade gave his. Apone spoke softly but without hesitation. Nanton added the death of the older woman. Takoda, brought in later under his father's hand, told how he had been separated by flood while Voss's riders fired near the crossing to spread panic. Silas Voss sat bloodless and sneering in a chair, hands bound, shoulder bandaged. Every so often he smiled as if the whole thing amused him. When all had spoken, Tully leaned back and looked tired in the soul. This is a heavy matter. It is a plain one, Elias said. Tully's eyes slid to him. Plain ain't always the same as easy. From the corner, Voss chuckled. Tell them, Marshal. Tell them how paper works when the dead ain't citizens worth ink. Takoda took one furious step forward. Elias put a hand out to stop him. Tully stood. He walked to Voss and looked down at him. Silas, you know the difference between a frontier and a sewer. Voss smirked. Enlighten me. A frontier has to choose every day whether it wants to become law or stay filth. Tully's voice stayed quiet. You've done your level best to keep us filthy. Then he ordered Voss jailed pending circuit judge review and swore out charges under territorial authority for murder, kidnapping, and incitement of armed conflict. Some folks in town muttered. A few shouted from the boardwalk. One ranch hand called it betrayal. Another said the Apache should take their own vengeance and be gone. Wade Harlan turned on them with a voice Elias had never heard him use. Any man that wants a war over one rat with a gun, step forward and say it clear. No one stepped. The cell door slammed. The sound carried. It did not end the trouble. Trouble like this never ended in one sound, but it marked a line in the ground. Nanton and his riders did not leave at once. That surprised everyone. They camped beyond town by the cottonwoods while Tully sent telegram and rider both to hurry the circuit authority. Some settlers cursed the presence of Apache so near. Others, seeing Apone alive and Voss jailed, kept their mouths shut and their children close. Elias returned to his cabin the second evening with his arms stitched and his body worn hollow. Takoda came with him under Nanton's agreement, not because the boy needed rescue now, but because he wanted one more night in the place where the river had spared him. The cabin seemed smaller after all that had passed. Takoda stood by the stove and touched the table edge. I thought perhaps your house would not still be here. So did I. The boy smiled a little. Elias lit the lamps. Outside, sunset burned red across the wet lowlands. For the first time in days, the river sounded less like rage and more like a living thing settling itself back into banks. Takoda looked up at him. My father says you carry grief. Your father says plenty. He says men who carry grief and still choose mercy are harder than warriors. Elias busied himself with the coffee pot. Your father gives out praise costly. That is why it matters. They ate beans and cornbread in the quiet. Then Takoda asked, did you ever have a son? The question entered soft and struck deep. Elias kept his eyes on the cup in his hand. No. You wanted one. That's so. Takoda waited. The old room held the silence until Elias gave in to it. My wife lost a baby in the winter of '68, he said. Boy would have come in spring. She near died with him. Fever took her 2 years later anyhow. Takoda said nothing. Elias looked out toward the dark where the river ran unseen. After that, I found it easier to live with horses than people. The child nodded in the grave way of children who have seen too much. My mother said broken hearts become cruel unless given work. Elias gave a rough laugh. Then your mother was wise. She was. Night deepened around the cabins. For the first time in many years, Elias did not feel alone in it. The circuit judge came 4 days later. Men packed the dry wells square to hear what would be done with sealers Voss. Settlers, teamsters, ranch wives standing on the edges with shawls drawn tight. Apache riders beyond the hitch line, silent and unreadable. Even children sensed the day had teeth in it. Judge Pomeroy was an old iron-backed man with spectacles and no gift for warmth. He heard the testimony in the church because it was the only building large enough to hold so much consequence. Elias sat straight through every word. Wade beside him, Nanton across the aisle still as carved wood, a pony with her aunt, Takoda on the bench behind his father, hands clasped hard. Voss tried charm, then insult, then contempt. None of it served him well. When the judgment came, it came clean, guilty on all counts, sentenced to hang. No one cheered. The church remained quiet as grave soil. Voss only laughed once more, but there was less music in it now. You think this changes men? He asked as deputies took him away. There'll be another. Maybe, Elias said, but it won't be you. Execution was set for 3 days later. That left a new danger. Men who had profited from Voss. Men who feared what he might say before a rope tightened. Men who did not want law growing stronger than their side deals. Marshal Tully came to Elias that night. I need a favor. You always look sick when you say that. Because your answers cost me aspirin. Tully sat on the porch rail and removed his hat. There are whispers 2 of Voss's old partners mean to spring him before dawn tomorrow. If they do it while Apache are still camped nearby, this town comes apart. Elias leaned against the post. What's the favor? Help me move him. Where? Old stone storehouse east of town. Better bars, less obvious. Elias looked toward the cottonwoods where Apache campfires glowed. If he escapes, Nanton will think you played him false. I know. So you need me because if trouble comes, both sides might believe me quicker than they believe each other. Tully sighed. I hate how often you understand things. They moved Voss near midnight with no lanterns and 4 horses walking soft. Elias rode flank, Tully rode point. 2 deputies took the rear. Voss, shackled hand and foot in the wagon bed, wore the kind of smile men wear when hope and malice shake hands. Halfway to the storehouse, shots cracked from the dark. The lead deputy pitched from his saddle. The mules screamed and veered. Down, Tully roared. Elias was already moving. He flung himself behind the wagon wheel as bullets thudded into wood. 2 riders came out of the mesquite, faces wrapped in cloth. One made for the wagon team. The other fired toward Tully. Elias recognized the first man's seat in the saddle before he saw the jaw. Clem Rourke. God help him. Elias fired low and hit the horse in the chest. Animal and rider tumbled in dust. The second masked man wheeled away, drawing Apache gunfire from the cottonwoods where sentries had heard the shots. Not Apache attacking. Apache responding, that mattered. Nanton's warriors came ghosting in from the darkness so fast it seemed the night itself had grown teeth. They did not shoot into confusion. They moved with terrible precision, cutting off roads, seizing the second rider when his horse stumbled in a wash. Clem Rourke lay in the dust with a broken leg and both hands in the air, cursing from pain and terror. Tully rose from behind the wagon. "You damned fool." Clem looked from the marshal to the Apache to Elias and started to weep. He said he'd pay, said Voss had gold buried south, said we could be across the border before. Tully kicked the rifle away from him. "Save it." Voss had rolled half off the wagon during the shooting, trying to work free of his chains. Takoda, who had followed the gunfire from the Apache camp against his father's orders, stood over him now with a dropped rifle pointed wrong but fearless. Nanton strode out of the dark and took the rifle gently from his son's hands. Takoda said he was running. "I see that." Voss glared at the boy. "You little savage." Takoda looked at him with a coldness no child should know. "The river should have taken you instead." For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then Elias said quietly, "That's enough." Takoda stepped back. Nanton laid a hand on his shoulder. Not rebuke, not praise, something steadier. They got Voss to the stone storehouse before dawn. After that, no one tried again. The hanging took place under a pale sky with wind moving dust along the street. No crowding close. No spectacle made of it. Judge Pomeroy had forbidden whiskey, shouting, and triumph, and Marshal Tully enforced that with 2 deputies and the kind of stare that made men remember they had mothers. Elias did not come to rejoice, he came to witness. Nanton did not stand in the square. He watched from the far side with his riders. A pony was not there, Takoda neither. Good. Silas Voss climbed the scaffold on his own feet. That was the last credit he would ever earn. He looked over the town, the Apache camp beyond, the river country farther still. Then his gaze found Elias. "You think you're different from me?" he called. Elias said nothing. Voss smiled one final crooked smile. "Only difference is I stopped lying to myself sooner." The trap dropped. The wind kept moving. A woman in the back began to pray. Elias looked away first, not from pity for Voss, but from pity for what a man becomes when he lets violence do all his thinking for him. Afterward, something in the valley shifted, not all at once, not clean, but enough. Settlers who had spent years speaking of Apache only in curses began, if not to soften, at least to lower their voices when Takoda's people rode near. Trade started again at the edge of dry wells under careful eyes. Marshal Tully, having found unexpected backbone in the matter, insisted crimes against Apache pass through the same office door as crimes against settlers. Wade Harlan backed him publicly. That mattered more than people liked to admit. Clem Rourke was jailed for aiding the escape attempt. When he limped out months later, he had gone small in the face and quiet in the mouth. As for Elias Boone, men looked at him differently. Some called him fool still, some traitor under their breath, but more and more called him something they had not before. Fair. He hated the word because it sounded too polished for a man with blood and dust still in memory, but he understood what they meant. He had stood where hatred offered simpler work and chosen the harder road. Folks noticed that, even when they wished they hadn't. One evening near the end of summer, when the river had drawn back into calmer banks and the cottonwoods were full green, Nanton rode alone to Elias' cabin. No war paint, no escort, just a father on a gray horse. Elias stepped onto the porch as the man dismounted. "A quiet visit," Elias said, "the best kind." They sat on the porch rail while sunset stretched gold across the pasture. For a while neither spoke. Men who had looked over rifles at each other once did not need to waste peace with chatter. At last Nanton said, "Takoda asks often when he may come again." Elias glanced sideways. "He does he? He says your coffee tastes like burnt saddles and your cornbread is dry, yet still he asks." Elias grunted. Boy S got poor judgment. Nanton's mouth moved with what might have been amusement. "He says you tell the truth even when it hurts your own side. That's a bad habit too." "It is a rare one." The light thinned. Nanton looked out toward the river. "When my son fell into the flood, I believed the water had taken from me what war had not. Then it gave him into the hands of a man I had reason to hate. I have thought on that many nights. Land. And I think the land watches what men do with their reasons." Elias let that sit. After a time, Nanton reached into his saddlebag and drew out something wrapped in buckskin. He handed it over. Inside lay a small carved river stone bound with turquoise cord, Takoda's necklace pattern. "For your house," Nanton said. "Among my people, it means the river remembers." Elias closed his hand around it. The stone was smooth and cool, shaped by long water and patient time. "Tell your son thank you." Nanton stood to go, then he paused. "No, this is from me." Oh, that struck deeper than the gift itself. Elias rose too. "Then I'll keep it where I can see it." Nanton mounted the gray horse. "Do that. A man should remember the crossings that changed him." He rode away into the dusk. Elias stood long after the hoofbeats faded. Inside, the cabin held its old plain things: stove, table, cot, rifle over the door, yet the room no longer felt like a place where a man had come only to hide from memory. It felt used by the living again. He set the carved stone on the mantel. Autumn came, then the first hint of winter. Takoda visited twice more with his father's blessing. The second time he brought dried venison and left with a pocket knife Elias claimed was too dull to keep. The boy laughed for the first time Elias had heard, a quick bright sound that startled the walls. Wade Harlan came by some Sundays now, bringing tobacco or gossip or nothing but his own stubborn company. They did not speak much about the quarry, or Voss, or the way events had bent them both. Older men rarely named their changes, they just lived them. One cold evening, Wade stood on the porch while the sky went iron over the river and said, "You know, this whole valley could have burned." Elias nodded. "Near did." "Yes." Wade shoved his hands into his coat. "Strange thing is, it didn't stop because the strongest men won. It stopped because 2 or 3 men decided not to be ruled by fear." Elias looked at the pasture, silver with frost. "Fear rules easiest." "Seems so." Wade glanced toward the stone on the mantel visible through the window. "You think peace lasts?" Elias considered the question the way he would consider whether over distant hills. "No." Wade frowned, comforting. "But respect can last," Elias said, "and sometimes that's what peace grows out of when no one's looking." Wade let out a breath that fogged in the cold. "You always did talk best after trouble." "Then maybe trouble's good for me." "Don't get greedy." They shared a quiet smile. Later that winter, after Wade had gone and the fire burned low, Elias stood alone by the window with a cup in his hands. Outside, the Rio Grande moved black under moonlight, no longer raging, no longer innocent. A river could drown a boy one week and carry a man's reflection the next. It changed and remained itself. Maybe people did too. He thought of Takoda in the flood, of a pony tied by the wagon wheel, of Nanton standing in the moonlit ring around his cabin, every reason for vengeance in his hands, and yet enough wisdom to wait one breath longer. He thought of Silas Voss on the scaffold, and how easy it would have been to answer cruelty with simpler cruelty. The old scar in Elias' ribs gave a dull pull in the cold. It always would. Some wounds did not heal. They instructed. He set the cup down and touched the river stone on the mantle, smooth, cool, worn by hard passage into something that fit the hand. Outside, somewhere far off beyond the cottonwoods, a wolf called once into the dark. The valley answered with silence, not the empty silence of fear, the fuller kind. The kind made when men who might have become enemies choose, for one narrow crossing of history, to let honor speak louder than blood. And in the small cabin above the Rio Grande, Elias Boone stood listening to that hard-won quiet, knowing the land around him had changed, because one child had been saved from the flood, one tribe had come in the night, and one man had learned that mercy, carried far enough, could alter the course of a river. If this story stirred a memory or two, saddle up with us again. Hit subscribe and help this old frontier tales alive. Out here, every name, every trail, every sunset still matter. So, till we meet again, friend, keep your hat tipped to the past and your heart pointed west.